Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Hari Om, everyone. Welcome to today's session on the review of Chapter 3 with summary presentation and group discussion. So for group discussion, we will be going into breakout rooms. We'll be doing it that way, but I'll explain more about that once we get there. But for today, here's the agenda. So part 1 will be verse presentation. So there will be 7 presentations, and we'd like to keep each one to 3 minutes each for a total of 21 minutes. And then we'll move out into breakout rooms for 20 minutes and discuss an allocated question. And then for part 3, we'll come back into the main group for a big group summary for 20 minutes. And then finally, we'll conclude with Rangaji's review for about 14 minutes for a total of our full class time of 1 hour and 15 minutes. So for those who are presenting summaries today, there will be a timer that will appear on the screen to guide you through your presentation. So yeah, so that's all for now. So I guess we can move into the presentations. So I'll go first with the presentation, with the introduction to Chapter 3, and then a quick summary of verses 1 to 3. So Chapter 3 is where we see Arjuna finally coming out of his despondent state, and he starts showing his receptivity towards Krishna by questioning him. Krishna therefore begins his sermons on the yoga of action, or karma yoga. So this chapter is divided into 6 segments, whereby Krishna first outlines what is meant by the path of action, and then intellectually appeals him to act. Then, after noticing that the intellectual appeal doesn't seem to evoke any kind of response out of Arjuna, Krishna then uses emotional tactics to convince Arjuna to act. After this technique seems to have worked on Arjuna, Krishna then explains what is meant by right action and how it is to be performed. Arjuna then asks why it's so difficult to perform the right action. And so Krishna then describes some obstacles along with right action. He then ends off by providing some solutions on how we can overcome these obstacles. Throughout the second chapter, and particularly in verse 49, Krishna mentions that knowledge is superior to action. So naturally, in chapter 3, Arjuna expresses his confusion on this matter in the first 2 verses of chapter 3. As a warrior, Arjuna is used to following very precise instructions by his commanders, and he's not really used to thinking for himself. And so he gets confused as to why Krishna is now suddenly preaching the path of action, and he wants Krishna to give him precise instructions on whether he should pursue the path of knowledge or path of action. Krishna explains that while the path to spiritual enlightenment is one, that path is twofold. It has an earlier segment and a latter segment. The earlier part is karma yoga, path of action, and the latter part is jnana yoga, path of knowledge. Depending on whether a person is more inclined towards action or more towards contemplation, it'll determine which part of that singular path a person should set out on. As a teacher, Krishna clearly understands that Arjuna is more extroverted and has a lot of vasanas, which also represents the state of the vast majority of human beings. Knowing that one must live according to one's own nature, Krishna therefore prescribes him karma yoga, the earlier part of the path to realization. With karma yoga, it will reduce the bulk of his desires and move him into a more contemplative mindset, which will then set the foundation for meditation and ultimately to self-realization. Thank you. So next we can have Sonia with presentation of verses 4 to 7, please.
Hariom. So this verse 4, begins the intellectual appeal for action and ways to reach actionlessness or liberation. So Bhagwan Krishna begins by teaching Arjuna the real meaning of actionlessness or perfection with respect to gaining moksha. He says a person does not gain the state of actionless by non-performance of activities, nor does a person attain success or liberation out of renunciation. So actionlessness does not mean giving up action. What we learned during this verse was how action requires the doer, and actions are based off of our gunas. So tamas leading to laziness or inaction, rajas leading us to perform desire-ridden action, which needs to be governed by the intellect in the long run, and sattva leads us to perform selfless, dynamic action leading to realization. The two paths of renunciation are karma yoga, acting for the higher, and jnana yoga, sannyasa, as Aparna was explaining, but one can't just become a sannyasi without karma yoga, because our raga dveshas or desires are present. So karma yoga is the means of jnana yoga, and jnana yoga becomes the means for moksha. So we have to try to align our thought, word, and deed. In verse 5, Bhagwan Krishna explains that no one can ever exist even for a moment without performing an action, because all are made to perform actions helplessly by our three gunas, born out of our prakriti, which is our nature. So we learned about our vasanas, our inherent nature, chronology of action, and how our vasanas lead to thoughts in the intellect, causing desires in the mind, and then the action in the body, which yield results, which are the karma phala, or the fruit of action, in order to reach perfection or the state of actionlessness. We must strive to act through karma yoga, which help us to rid our vasanas by dedicating ourselves to the higher, which leads to desirelessness, allowing us to feel through bhakti yoga, which is our path of devotion, allow us to think through jnana yoga, which is our path of knowledge or thoughtlessness, and then finally we can reach restfulness or dhyanam or vasanaless. In verse 6, Bhagwan Krishna continues by saying that the one who controls the organ of actions can sit with their mind remembering the sense objects. That is the person that is deluded and is called a hypocrite. We have to remember, we learned that our organs of actions are our sense organs. And we learned the definition of sannyasi, which means the destroying of the mind from governing the senses. Governing the senses will help us govern the mind, even though, well, just thinking that we are controlling our senses for preventing action means that we are acting, so we can't just do nothing. So why do nothing when we can be acting for the higher, was basically the question. And then finally, verse 7, Bhagwan Krishna teaches us that he describes a person who begins doing karma with organs of actions with a proper attitude, and is one that can be Indriyani Raja, so the ruler of the five senses. And so we learned about the three results of our action, which are the drishtaphala, the seen results of an action as an object of one's desire, adrishtaphala, which is the unseen results, which are the consequences, which would be our papa and punya, sin and merit, and the chitta shuddhi, which is evolution, and finally the increasing and decreasing of our vasanas. That's it.
Thank you, Sonia. Next, we can have Vijay present the summary of verses 8 to 10.
Krishna continues his intellectual appeal for action from Arjuna in verses 8, 9, and 10. Verse 8 says that you will have to engage in action even to keep your body fit. For instance, if you do not exercise a part of the body, you will lose the muscle function. Hence, action is superior to inaction. Inaction is roga, which leads to death and decay. Action can be either restless action or restful action. Restless action is bhoga, where there is stress, mind is ungoverned, and intellect is held hostage. Restful action is yoga, where the body is dynamic, mind is governed, and intellect is objective. Actions in general can be of 5 types. Nitya karma, which are regular routine duties, Naimatika karma, occasional special duties, Kamya karma, desire-ridden actions, Nishida karma, forbidden actions, and Akarma, attunement of the self. Nitya karma and Naimatika karma are together called Niyatam karma. As you perform the first 4 types, the last type, attunement of the self, happens. Verse 9 interprets yajna as sacrifice or action dedicated to a higher ideal. Krishna says we are bound by any action other than yajna because of the attachment to the action. Yajna or havan typically refers to the fire ritual where the performer or house or establishment is cleansed of sin and evil. The Agni Kund, where the havan is performed, corresponds to our field of activity. The Agni and Samat, which is the pilot, fire, and chanting, corresponds to our goal, purpose, or objective. The Ahuti, or offering in the form of grains and ghee, corresponds to the contributions or cooperation and the concept of idam na mama, that is the non-arrogation of results. In other words, we do the action to meet the organization's objectives, and it comes from sacrifice, not from individuality. And finally, the prasad, which is the ashes, corresponds to the distribution of productivity and prosperity to all. In verse 10, Krishna explains how the creator Prajapati created humans with the capacity to perform yajna. The creator said humans are endowed with yajna, which will be like the milch cow, Kamadhenu, which will give everything that a seeker wants. This yajna is the uniqueness of the choice of action that humans have, which plants and animals do not have. This choice of action is the capacity to evolve or devolve, and the faculty of reasoning and thinking, which is the intellect. Thus, Krishna continues his intellectual appeal for action and asks Arjuna to fight this war as his yajna and to do his duty. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we can have Sheetal with presentation of verses 11 to 13.
Hari Om. For the summary of verse 11, it is basically Nourish is referring to performing actions with yajna, and God symbolizes the entire sphere of human activities. So in this verse, Krishna is saying when we perform our action as a yajna, all the gods and goddesses are pleased. As a result, the gods bless us with wisdom, knowledge, wealth, prosperity, and all other favorable material conditions that we need in this world. If you offer all your actions as a yajna without ever wishing for the results of their actions, that is a karma yogi, and such a person develops control over their mind and senses for higher spiritual knowledge and eventually gains moksha. In verse 12, he is carrying on with the same concept, but he's referring to tamasic category of people. He's saying that if we start using these blessings as a means to feed our own selfish motives instead of using it towards the Supreme Lord, then we are no different than a thief. He's saying that we should realize that everything we receive for our survival in this material world is to be used for the purpose of worshiping the Lord. Then we shall keep being blessed and develop purity of mind, which is required to discover the knowledge of self. In verse 13, he's referring to Sattvic and Rajasic category of people. Sin in this verse is referring to mental agitation, and cook is referring to performing action in this verse, but for their own sake. You're performing the action for your own sake. So in a Sattvic people, they offer their food to God because they recognize everything is a gift from God. Whatever we receive has to be offered back to the same God. And then we are released from all those sins committed in the process of cooking food. Whereas in Rajasic and Tamasic people, they are less conscious of these subtle gestures because of their greed and selfishness. Such people cook for their enjoyment only and are ungrateful. And such people are sinners in Lord Krishna's words. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we can have Vimal with presentation of verses 14 to 16.
Sure. Hari Om, everyone. So in continuation of the theme of Yajna, which was introduced in verse 9, verses 14 and 15 use an agricultural metaphor to explain the process of Yajna. In verse 14, it explains the linkage of Yajna to beings. So Yajna is, as explained, the selfless and sacrificial action that embodies the social harmony for the greater benefit of all. So when people perform Yajna, they create the right mental attitude or environment, and is a blessing which is rain in this metaphor. So rain is essential for the production of food, which provides vitality for life. Food can also be related to the production of material goods. So out of food come beings. So once again, food not only for the stomach, but also for the sense organs and for the material prosperity in general. In verse 14, it starts with Yajna. This results in rain. With rain comes food, and food is used to sustain all beings. So this could also be explained with the example of a factory. On one side, it is a raw material, and if people work in the spirit of service and sacrifice, which is Yajna, they will build the best products. This results in abundance and prosperity for all. In verse 15, it explains the linkage of Yajna to Brahman. So Brahman is the supreme reality and is all-pervading. Everything terrestrial and transcendental is Brahman. Out of the infinite Brahman arises Brahma, the creator, and represents everything terrestrial. From the creator flows actions. Out of these selfless and sacrificial actions, we have Yajna. To put verse 14 and 15 together, we are able to clearly see the relationship between Brahman on one end, Yajna in the middle, and beings on the other end. Hence, Yajna is like a pivot balancing the unmanifest and the manifest, and that all-pervading Brahman rests in Yajna. So verse 16 talks about the consequences of disregarding Yajna. So Yajna means the right choice of action and actions performed selflessly and for the welfare of everyone. Such actions sets the wheels of progress towards the ultimate destination of peace and bliss for everyone. For those who do not follow this path or this wheel of progress, they go through much suffering and sorrow. Basically, the verse talks about man's infatuation with the senses and the resulting enchantment of the sense objects. They do not realize that sense objects will provide instant pleasure, but eventually cause a great deal of distress. On the flip side, those who engage in sacrificial actions find it unpleasant in the beginning, but eventually the same actions result in prosperity and peace. The wise know this, and they follow the path of Yajna. The ignorant helplessly follow the path of sensuality and forsake the infinite joy within. Thank you.
Thanks, Vimal. Next, we can have Gita Nandini present verses 17 to 19.
Gitanandani, we cannot hear you. At least I can't hear you. I don't know about others. You can. Aparna, you were able to hear?
No, wasn't.
You can just switch on the mic, please.
Yeah. Hari Om. This verse talks about an ideal person or a perfect person or an enlightened person who doesn't have any need for performing obligatory duties or functions. So here it is described as self-satisfied in three ways because of the contrast of happiness which we derive from the three avenues, that is perceptions, emotions, and thoughts. We engage these perceptions, emotions, and thoughts in the world to gain pleasure and happiness. But the pleasure and happiness which we gain from the world is temporary but not permanent. This is because our focus is mainly and attention is mainly on the body, mind, and intellect rather than on the self within. So here, how to gain the permanent happiness? So Arthur Schopenhauer says it is difficult to find happiness within oneself, but impossible to find happiness anywhere else. So how to gain that perfect happiness? So when we perform our obligatory duties and functions with a spirit of service and sacrifice and try to eradicate our vasanas and desires, we are well into the path of spiritual progress and into self-realization. So thus an enlightened person is self-satisfied for happiness and is totally independent of the world. In verse 18, continuing on the same thought wave, Krishna says, a self-realized person is paripurna, that is self-sufficient. He doesn't have any interest in what is done and what is not done, and he is independent of all the objects and beings in the world. So here this verse says how a realized person, self-realized person views the world. So here Swamiji draws a parallel of a self-realized soul to a waker re-entering his dream. In a dream, a person, he is like serving the needy and poor and does virtuous deeds. So when he is doing virtuous deeds and getting felicitated, at that time of felicitation, he wakes up from his dream. So upon waking up from the dream, he doesn't have any wish or desire to get back into the dream. He totally disconnects and disengages himself from the dream. Similarly, a realized person, upon entering the fourth state or the turiya, totally disengages himself from the waking world of perceptions, emotions, and thoughts. So finally, in verse 19, Krishna concludes the intellectual appeal of action to Arjuna. So he says, therefore, Arjuna, perform action without attachment. So as long as we have desires and vasanas, we have to perform our obligatory duties and functions. But the thing is, we have to perform our obligatory duties and functions independent of likes and dislikes and intellect governing the mind. So when we perform actions like this, we are well into the path of self-realization and into state of perfection. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Pramod with presentation of verses 20 to 24.
Hari Om, everyone. So after making an intellectual appeal in verses 14 to 19, Lord Krishna now switches gears to making 6 emotional appeals in the next 5 verses, 20 to 24. So he first starts with the devotional angle by referring to King Janaka, who attained perfection through action alone. And he does this because he knows Arjuna as a prince, revered King Janaka as a great personality. So the message for us here is that devotion helps us gain the inspiration to move towards the subtler as we become aware of our areas of limitations. When we know that when we know our limitations, we identify the source of knowledge that would help us. We then become willing to overcome our limitations, and we learn without ego, with an attitude of surrender. Lord Krishna then switches his angle to an angle of persuasion by asking Arjuna to perform action for the welfare of the world, Loka Sangraha. What this teaches us is that inspiration comes only from sacrifice, not through intelligence. Unselfish action leads to the purification of our mind, which helps attaining peace through the confluence of mind and intellect. And then Lord Krishna targets Arjuna's vanity by asking him to perform his duty as people do what a superior person does. Essentially, he's asking Arjuna to be the role model for the society, especially as the prince. When a great person does something, his or her deeds are imitated, and it sets the benchmark for other people to rise to. He then makes an appeal, a very personal appeal to Arjuna, by saying that although he, or Lord Krishna, doesn't need anything from for himself from the 3 worlds, he was still doing his duty by being Arjuna's charioteer in the righteous war. Again, the message for us is that our sense of obligation should drive the action we take. We then perform unselfish action. When we perform unselfish action, we must not allow desires to interfere, as selfishness is the root of all problems. And then Lord Krishna plants a fear in Arjuna's mind, as when conviction does not work, then fear has to be triggered. So Krishna says that if he did not perform his duties, other people would follow his example in that respect too. Again, the message for us is that we should be wary of the common trait of settling for the path of least resistance to avoid hard work. And then finally, Lord Krishna makes an appeal by posing a threat. He says that the world would collapse into lawlessness if he or Krishna did not perform his dutiful actions. Essentially, he's appealing to Arjuna, a leader whom society is bound to take note of in every detail, to do his duty and fight the righteous war. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we'll move out into our small group discussions. So the breakout rooms will automatically assign all of you to different groups. So within each group, one of you can kind of take the lead, serve as the moderator, can read out the question with its various options, and then ask the members of your group for their inputs. Please ensure that everyone gets enough time to present their views on the question during the breakout room time, which is 20 minutes. And please be precise and brief in explaining your answers. After the breakout rooms, one person from each group can summarize and present your answers in the main group. And then after completion of all groups, Rangaji will then add any contributions that he might have to any questions. And then finally, if time permits, we'll take up any general questions. I guess we'll give a minute for everyone to come back. Okay, so now we can take up our answers. So we can get started with group 1. If one person from the group wants to just share what they discussed.
This is
Divya, are you speaking or who's speaking?
Yeah,
No one's
sorry.
speaking.
Sorry. I was speaking, but I was on mute. So part A, I will start with like 2 or 3 major adverse consequences of pursuing knowledge before karma. So we felt that one is escapism. Person is running away in the name of knowledge from doing action, like abandoning their obligations, their duties. And yeah, that's the main thing, running away from their obligations. That's the major we felt is adverse consequence when karma is not done and like just going for the knowledge. And Meryl, do you want to do second part of this question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Hari Om, everyone. I think the second part, mostly we could see the adverse consequences of abandoning, well, the second part of the question, I think it has to do with the acquisition. So we live in a society, in a world that focuses on acquisition and desires. We're desire-ridden, we're greedy, we're wanting more. Looking to acquire more, and it's more in the name of we're acting more selfishly in the name of for our own selves, for our own family, and also it also I think leads to the mental illness that we are seeing, that we're experiencing more so than I think we've ever had in our lifetime. So that's kind of where I'm seeing those adverse consequences impacting our current generation. Thank you.
Okay, and yeah, and part B, so instead of impractical suggestion, like Krishna suggested in verse 3 and 4. So Krishna suggested, like he advised that Jnana Yoga is for the introvert person and Karma Yoga is for the extrovert person. As like one cannot get actionless by running away from the action. Like renunciation is the way to act and to get into the perfection of the action. So yeah, so we are done.
Okay, thank you. And then we can move on to group 2.
Hello, this is Gayatri. And after a brief discussion for the first one, having performed Karma Yoga, a jnani abandons action. So we all, I mean, like unanimously we understood that the jnani does not abandon action, rather action falls off from him, or the need for helpless action falls away from him. So he is under control, and it's up to him whether he needs to act or whatever, however he chooses. So it's not, he's not abandoning action, which is associated with the second question as well. And, like people, many a time they think like spirituality is associated, spirituality means escapism, because they have not understood like spirituality is facing the challenges and working over here. They think like, it's like spirituality means garbing robes and moving away from the field of action. Rather, it is not so. And which is why Vivekananda very clearly says, go and play football. So this is your field of action. And unless and otherwise you perform your actions, you cannot gain spirituality. So this is what we concluded.
Thank you. Group 3, next.
Hari Om, I'm Harish. So in this where Arjuna asks Krishna that why is he persuading him to do action if knowledge, jnanam, is superior to karma. So what we discuss is that because Arjuna is a warrior, and for reason for him to having more rajasic guna, so the right path for him to do self-realization will be through action, and that's the reason why Krishna is persuading Arjuna to have the self-realization through performing the right action, and in this case is to fight this righteous war. The second part, B, where the question is, why isn't bhakti yoga or being mentioned or totally missing from this chapter, and is only focusing on jnanam and karma. So here also what we understand is that the state at which Arjuna is, he's being collapsed in the battlefield, and where he's not able to understand whether he needs to fight the battle or not. And so Krishna realizes that Arjuna is still not at that level where he can understand the bhakti yoga. And that's the reason why Krishna is again persuading Arjuna to do the action, and then have self-realization through action to do the righteous action at that stage. And that's the reason why he is not bringing up the concept of bhakti yoga at this stage. Gita, Nandini, if you would like to add anything to this.
Yeah, Hari Om. So what I understood was like without bhakti, jnana or karma cannot be it cannot be pursued. So what we also discussed was with the underlining of bhakti, either you gain knowledge or you do action. Like you gain knowledge from a guru, you serve him, or you do an action. Without bhakti, it is not a perfect action. And without bhakti, you cannot gain the perfect knowledge from a guru. So that's what we also discussed.
Okay, now we can move on to group 4.
Yeah. Hi, Hari Om, everyone. So for the first part, for part A, we have the summary of our answers. It's action and knowledge go hand in hand. However, action gives us that chidshuddhi and kind of prepares us to acquire that knowledge. So that is the summary of all our answers for part A. And for part B, where we talk about the karma action, that how this knowledge helps us. So by gaining this basic knowledge, we gain that what kind of vasanas, especially what kind of proportion of these 3 vasanas, gunas we have like sattvic, rajas, and tamas. So we kind of understand and we prepare our baseline to start our actions. Like some people have sattvic more and some people have rajas, and what kind of proportion we have. So that is the summary of part B. Thank you.
Group 5.
Okay, Hari Om, everyone. So our group had quite a good discussion in relation to question A. One of the things that we talked about was in terms of being able to conclude that in our religion, there are more evolved saints. So we had a discussion about whether we have the authority to actually conclude that. However, we were all a little biased in saying that since we've been sort of on this path of Vedanta, we've been really able to see clarity and connection between knowledge and action, in the sense that we understand the value of knowledge, but without the right karma action, we also understand the consequences of that. So we had a lot of good discussion about that. In relation to question number 2, and one of the other things we talked about is that the nice part about the Vedanta, and I guess being on this path, is we talked about the flexibility in the journey of spiritual evolution. So we said, in terms of having the opportunity to do the knowledge, to do the action, and there's a lot of flexibility. Like when you look at a lot of religions, there is a lot of do's and don'ts, but this path offers us the opportunity for contemplation and reflection, and not really be attached to the person, but to really understand and evolve in the Sanatana Dharma. And then the next one, we talked about how, again, there's flexibility in terms of, what we've understood from Vedanta is that different gods and goddesses have sort of presented to us because the realized rishis knew that our minds and ideas were going to go into the world. So again, we talked about the flexibilities, and we talked about how there is a one reality, and how it goes back to, the ideals are just there to represent the ideals, to do that. I don't know if anybody else in the group wants to add on to anything, if I missed anything. I guess I did a good job then. Thank you.
Thank you. Group 6, please.
Namaskaram, everyone. I'm Bhaskaran Rajamani. We had a very good discussion in our group. Everyone contributed, and we talked about these. We had four statements that we needed to go through. The first one, both jnanam and karma are required for all seekers. Yes, that is true. In the initial stages, it's karma, and later stages, knowledge. So yeah, we kind of reflected on that and started working on the questions B, C, and D. If this is true, how can karma action happen without jnanam? So there we, after some discussion, we came to the realization is knowledge is very broad term, right? So we are talking about knowledge. For example, if I'm a car servicing technician, I need to have knowledge of how the car works to do that. That knowledge is different. That also helps me to perform my karma if I'm a car mechanic. At the same time, knowledge of the Supreme, or the knowledge that I am the Supreme, Aham Brahmasmi, is a different level of knowledge. So we need to understand the context of the word knowledge in understanding this particular statement of how karma can happen without knowledge. So karma can happen with knowledge of a certain kind for you to perform the karma. But when it becomes, of course, we also talked about when karma becomes karma yoga, when you do the proper action with the proper attitude. And then, so that's kind of the first reflection we had on question B. Question C, effects of jnanam and karma in the context of spiritual evolution. So we talked about the exact continuation of the same context, that when you perform karma with the knowledge that you acquire as part of your profession or swadharma, then you now have to understand and commit yourselves to making that karma yoga by engaging in the right dharmic, righteous action with the right attitude, without any ego or egocentric desires. That's kind of the knowledge we are getting in classes like this through Smaranam. And then we reflect on it to really engage in proper karma yoga to really qualify for the real supreme knowledge that we talked about. So we had a little bit of discussion there to really debate on that, to really understand that. And then we moved into question D, which is Karma Ganda and the Veda Purvam Veda Angam, where we basically said that, look, the Vedas in the Veda Purvam prescribes the various rituals, the Panchamaha Yajna and all those karma upasanas, while in the later part of Veda, it talks about knowledge, giving us the sequence of, you first go through that and then graduate to really pursue Vedanta, or the knowledge of the Supreme. And then at that time, when karma is denounced, basically we need to interpret that as more as karma is not denounced, but it's more to understand the limitations of karma. And you have to leave the pole to jump across the pole vault. So you need to understand that that's the denouncement we need to think about in terms of the pole vault example. Thank you. Anyone else from the group wants to add? Sorry, I went a little bit over, I think. Aparna switched back the time, so I realized. Thank you.
Thank you. We can have group 7 go next.
Yeah, so this is Vijay. So we, in our question, we decided that it's not really one choice, because all the choices that are presented here have significance in terms of karma yoga, and it is really the chronology of action that is modified with the concept of yajna. So with yajna, the higher goal, and then free from attachment, it is the fire ritual. It is symbolic of karma yoga. And it is also sacrifice, which is sacrificing in terms of making our contributions and our actions in service of a higher ideal. And it is also the burning of ignorance, or the vasanas, which is one of the effects of karma yoga, which is the decreasing of vasanas. And then finally, it is also leads to chitta shuddhi, which is the purification of the mind, which is the evolution of the person. So in that sense, it is not really one choice from this. It is a sequence that we find in the different choices that are presented here. And they're all representative of karma yoga and yajna. Anybody from my group wants to add anything else? If not,
Aparna, do you have the PPT with you? I think Swarna is.
Yeah, I'm just downloading it right now. But if group 7 is done, we can move on to group 8.
If you can show us the question
Yeah,
and the
I'll
options.
have that up in a minute.
Hari Om. Our question was that what is the, sorry for my sore throat, sorry for that. What is the correlation between Swadharma, karma, action, and Varna, color and castes? So there are 4 choices given. Our group felt that choice B is the best choice, but I will explain all the choices. So A was that Swadharma determines Varna, action or profession is immaterial. So our team felt that action or profession is immaterial is wrong. So that's why that option we didn't select. The B is Swadharma determines the skill, Varna determines temperament, and together they impact the action. This is what our team felt is the correct answer. I will also explain the other 2 options as well. The C option was Swadharma spontaneously expressed as karma or action. As per action, Varna, caste is determined. So in this, what our team felt was that Swadharma in spontaneously expressed as karma. So that spontaneously part, we felt that that may not be true Swadharma, because in any instant immediate case, you could be different because you have to act as per that particular instance. And part D was none of the above are fully correct. And if this is your choice, then please explain the correlation. So we didn't feel that none of the above was correct. We felt that B was the correct. Now, if my team members would like to add any additional thoughts. I think it's good then. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we can move on to group 9.
Right, so for group 9, the question was based on verses 6 and 7 of chapter 3, pick the right statement. So we briefly went through what the verses itself talk about. And verse 6 basically explains the kind of individual who restrains the organs of action, but mentally he is still thinking about the sense objects. So that individual is termed a hypocrite. Whereas verse 7 talks about the individual who deals with the desires at a mental level, and he is trying to direct his mind towards the higher goals or the ideals in life and towards spiritual evolution, and doesn't fall prey to the mental indulgences. So we had a very good discussion. We reviewed literally all of the statements or the options given below. The team was kind of split between C and A, but we also felt that really all of the statements given there are subtle differences between them. But if there is a good fit, the team felt maybe between C and A is where we would go. And they are talking about the same thing. A hypocrite is one who's unable to rid of his vasanas, which is what the verse is talking about. But he pretends because mentally he's still thinking about those vasanas or those desires. Whereas the real restraint is coming from mental control, and that is verse 7. So that is one facet of the karma yoga. Whereas option C is also talking about that in a little different way. Mentally lingering increases vasanas, but not physical participation alone. Hypocrite lingers mentally, withdraws physically, whereas restraining mind with higher knowledge go through the experiences of the idea of getting out of it one day. So that is karma yoga. So really between A and C is pretty much, we felt pretty much the same thing. So if there is another viewpoint from the group, please feel free to share. Okay, if not, thank you.
Okay, group 10.
Hari Om, this is Arvind. We had 4 members, and Ashutosh, thank you for getting all of us to be participating in it. The question here is, which is faced by all of us in the ordinary course, actions are selfish, self-centered, and we are much more on ourself and the family unit. The question is, why is that? And there were choices that were given. When we looked at and evaluated the choices, we saw that the choice D was the starting point of awareness. In the absence of awareness, you do not even identify that you are doing these sort of actions. However, as we started our discussions, we realized that all of the other A, B, C are also intertwined in it. It can't be just one, because in the ordinary course, we follow our day-to-day routine like a pedestal or a treadmill, wherein we are caught up unaware of even stopping and pausing on what we need to do, or even the desires that come in, not even knowing in which direction it is moving. So we were thinking of collectively as a group that many of these intersect one another. We then also paused on option number E of individual reasonings. And again, I think constant indulgence and knowing rather than focusing inward, always focusing outward, gets us into literally lack of awareness that happens. So throughout, I think if we had a choice of all the above, we would have even picked that rather than what is not covered above. But I think it was a good forum. We had diverse thoughts, and everything came together at the very end. I don't know whether my team members have any other comments. Thank you very much. It was very engaging, Rangaji. The format, I didn't know how it was working, but it was very engaging.
Okay, thank you everyone for sharing your discussions. Now we can have Rangaji take up the answers. I guess starting with group 1.
Do we have any general question? Any questions sent in by people which is not in the stem? from third chapter. Swarna circulated a form. Did anyone fill in and send any question that you have populated here in the slides? No.
No.
Okay, then we can go with group 1. The consequences of pursuing knowledge before karma, the adverse consequences. The first is false vairagya. We start justifying. Jnanam says everything is attitude. Karma says everything is action. They are opposed to each other. Jnanam says, na guru, na sishya. There is no guru, there is no sishya. Whether it is Rama or Hanuman, both are Atma. This is what Jnanam says. Karma says, no, you are Sishya, he is your Guru. There is a way to relate to the Guru. Now, which is practical for any one of us to follow in life? Very easy for us to say, Guru is Atma, I am Atma, everything is Atma. What is the difference in relationships? So I can call my Guru by name because everything is Atma finally. I am also Atma. So the problem with pursuing knowledge without getting established in karma, karma is not rituals, karma is unselfishness, sense of gratitude is, we start justifying our actions. I don't have to wear a tilak, I know what it is for. You understand? Tilak, I heard in the class that it represents Atman. I always remember Atman, why should I wear a tilak? So a person becomes indifferent, a person starts justifying their wrong actions. Because of which they said, gain this knowledge, but you cannot directly live this knowledge. Where you live your life is in terms of checking the action level. I wish well for Canada. My attitude is right, but I will not pay taxes. No, you have to pay taxes. You don't wish well for Canada. You wish all ill wishes you have for Canada. It's okay, but pay taxes. You understand, Pramod? My wish is enough. Canada will evolve. Taxes I won't pay. No, you have to act rightly first. If you can't feel and think rightly for the country, it's okay. At least act rightly. So we cannot say I'm feeling and thinking rightly. I don't have to act rightly. Instead of impractical suggestion of reverting back to Vedic or ritualistic age, what does Krishna suggest? He says, you can't go back to the ritual way of life, which is karma kanda. Today it is not possible for any one of us because of innumerable choices we have made. So what is that Krishna advises? He says, you are already having a field of activity. Convert this field of activity and your action into worship. Then it becomes yajna. This is the suggestion. Krishna is not asking us, abandon your job, abandon your business, abandon your family. A Hindu is married to a Christian, abandon your partner. You have to follow Hinduism only. He is not saying that. He says we have far moved away. We have lost all this way of life. Hinduism is no more a way of life. Whatever is our way of life, we call it Hinduism now. So he says you cannot go back. It is not practical to go back. It is very idealistic thought. So what is that you can do? Your own field of activity, use it as karma kanda, as karma yoga, convert it into action. Group 2. Jnani abandons action. It is right that Jnani doesn't abandon action. He evolves out of action. But the question is, how is such an abandonment, being non-active or inactive, how is it that it is not considered escapism or lethargy? There are two ways in which action drops. First chapter of Gita, Arjuna Vishada Yogam. Vishadam, action drops. Sannyasa, Moksha Sannyasa Yoga, 18th chapter. By gaining moksha, you gain liberation from action. So how do you move from dropping action to growing out of action? Through knowledge. As long as identification or sense of individuality is upon body, mind, and intellect, there is always an unfulfillment because we are looking at world, we are looking at others. That person has it, I don't have it. Unfulfillment cannot be ruled out. Even if you don't compare yourself with others, your own desires, our own desires haunt us. Jnani is one who has completely recovered his identity upon the consciousness. So with the bliss of self, there is no vasanas, there is no incompleteness, there are no desires. Action doesn't drop, but the compulsion to action has disappeared. And that is why Vivekananda said, don't leave action, start acting. Therefore, he said, go play football. Be active, he said. Third. Beautifully covered part A. Part B, Bhakti Yoga, Gita Nandini stepped in and covered. Bhakti is attitude. In order to develop this attitude, upasanas are given. Today is Sankranti, Pongal, celebrated in South India. Imagine you're a farmer. The first harvest of crop that you have worked on in the last year is in front of you. It is exactly like your project. Any one of you who are in IT, you've been working for 1 full year, a team of 25, 30 people, and the entire project is launched and everything is green, 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 success, success, success. How would you feel? You see NASA and ISRO, when they launch the satellite, they're all jumping, pumping their fist. This is exactly what the farmer is doing. He is paying his gratitude to sun, to moon, to nature, to bull, to the land. Because without all the participation of all these resources, all these blessings, that grain in front of him would not be there. So the first harvest is cooked for God. It is not cooked for oneself. It is cooked and oblated to the higher. So all these rituals, all these upasanas, all the festivals are only to give that bhavana in a person. So that bhavana is not only in Sankranti Pongal. When you perform any action, the dedication should be there. Sometimes you see this signboards. My father awaits. My child is waiting at home for me. Please drive slowly. You see those boards, What is it talking about? It's talking about an attitude. So the moment you see a person, you can see that person as, oh, intrusion. What a lazy fellow. Or you can look at him as, this fellow is also earning a living like me. Attitude changes. Without the attitude changing, any amount of knowledge is intelligence only. It will help others. It is like a donkey wearing a bag full of gold. The donkey cannot use the gold to fulfill its hunger. It's useful for others. So without bhavana, knowledge is of no use. Without bhavana, there cannot be karma. There cannot be karma yoga. There can only be karma. Kamya karma. Desire-ridden actions. So bhakti is implied in jnanam and karma. Without bhakti, there is no jnanam and karma. That is why Krishna is not talking about bhakti as a specific path. Bhakti as a specific path comes only in terms of upasana. Next. Required for initial stickers. Yeah. So the answer for both is, it is right that knowledge, the real knowledge comes later. As Mr. Rajamani explained, there is an earlier segment where knowledge is gained. Brahma Satyam Jagat Mityam Tattvamasi. This knowledge is required. But after 10 a.m., this knowledge will not work in life. If the person has requested for puri bhaji for breakfast, and puri bhaji is not there, bread sandwich is there, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mityam goes out of the window. I want puri bhaji. Who asked you to make bread sandwich? But 5 minutes before you said Brahma Satyam Jagat Mityam, illusion. In illusory world, whether it is sandwich or puri bhaji, what does it matter? That is for Ramana Maharishi. That is for Ranga. Even he is not going to follow it in his life. I want my puri bhaji. So our level of mind, where it is. In order to say that this is where the mind is, but a human being is capable of reaching that height, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mityam, we all need that knowledge now. If you don't have that knowledge, you will not have a direction. But where is that having gained the knowledge, you focus your effort on? It is on karma. Next. Yeah. So, Asha, it is quite right and emphatically true to say that Sanatana Dharma has had innumerable sages and saints. It won't be wrong at all, and it won't be unpolitical. It is exactly like saying the Western world has had a lot more scientists than Indians. What is wrong in it? It is right to say that Argentina, even a handicapped person plays better soccer than an average Indian sports person. There is nothing wrong in it. If required, we can give statistics also for that. So, but the reason here is all religions based on jnanam and karma. If that is true, why we don't see so many self-realized evolved saints in other faiths, in other religion? All other religion take a part of the whole works. This is the reason. When you take a part, you can only excel in that part. You can't become the whole. Religion means matam. Sanatana dharma is dharmam. It is talking about the eternal realities of life. And what is the pillar of Sanatana Dharmam? Tat Tvamasi. You are the divinity that you are seeking. You are not this body, you are not this mind, you are not this intellect. This knowledge is not pumped in any other religion. In the Islamic world, if you say, Aham Brahmasmi, I am God, I don't know what will happen. Pramod can explain what will happen. Vimal can explain what will happen. They've all stayed in Islamic world. Of course, I've also stayed in Dubai, Abu Dhabi. You go to the streets and say, Aham Brahmasmi, I am God. Because that faith has a particular definition about God. You can't break that. Similarly, Christian world, is Jesus Christ the God or Father in heaven the God? Who's the God? Who's Lord? So there is confusion for a person who seeks deeper. That is why you find deep thinkers, people who are seeking something more than conformity to religion, go towards the Upanishads, towards the literatures. So Sanatana Dharma obviously has opened up avenues of realizing the self. Therefore, we find a lot more sages and saints. And one incidental but very, very valuable difference is the Guru Sishya Parampara. In your lifetime, you might have seen 3 or 4 popes raised to the seat in the Vatican, but you don't call it a Guru Sishya Parampara. Innumerable presidents in the United States, you don't call it President Parampara. So here there is a Guru Sishya Parampara, which has maintained the knowledge, and the Guru has ensured that enlightenment is bestowed on the person who deserves it most. He works with the disciple and brings him up. Second part covered. Next group, please. Yeah, this was also covered very well. Karma and jnana, what places they have in spiritual path. Next, please. How is yajna associated with karma yoga? Yajna is the fire ritual. It is symbolic of karma yoga. Yajna is sacrifice, the essence of karma yoga. Yajna is burning ignorance, vasanas. It is the effect of karma yoga. Yajna purifies the mind. After that, one's actions turn into karma yoga. Frankly speaking, I don't know what is the right answer. I prepared the question, but I didn't highlight the right answer myself. So I have to do some thinking. Yajna, how is it associated with karma yoga? Yajna is karma yoga. Karma yoga means action dedicated towards union with the self. When you dedicate an action towards a higher purpose, which is uniting with the self, the vasanas are getting burned. Yajna is a symbolic gesture, a ritual, which is trying to signify this knowledge. It is a significant ritual. So yajna is a fire ritual. It is symbolic of karma yoga. Correct. Yajna is sacrifice. It is the essence of karma yoga. Correct. Yajna is burning of ignorance, vasanas. It is the effect of karma yoga. Not 100% right. Yajna is burning of ignorance, vasanas. It is karma yoga. We can also say it is the effect of karma yoga, because burning of ignorance and vasana is the effect of yajna. Yajna purifies the mind. After that, one's actions turn into karma yoga. That is also not right. Purified action is yajna. Next, please. Correlation between Swadharma, Karma and Varna. Kamal, you ruled out A, that is right. You ruled out B, that is right. C, if you had to pick up one of the 3 choices, C would seem more appropriate. So you picked up C. Swadharma is spontaneously expressed as karma action. as per action, varna, you picked up B, you ruled out A, you ruled out C, you picked up B. Swadharma determines skill, Varna determines temperament. Together they impact action. It is incidentally true. But what is the actual correlation between Swadharma, Karma and Varna? The correlation between Swadharma, Karma and Varna happens only after gaining knowledge. As you gain knowledge, these three get aligned in your life. They should get aligned in the life. So your karma is based on your Swadharma, and your Swadharma, one of the main factors will be based on your Varna. This is the correlation. If you remember, that was the explanation we went through for about a couple of classes. Varna means the gunas, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. The permutation combination of Sattva, Rajas, Tamas will determine the Swadharma of a person. It will automatically express. And according to the Swadharma, there will be inducement from within for karma, or else a person has to align towards one Swadharma, karma towards Swadharma. This is the correlation. Today, in most of us, it remains disintegrated or ignorant or unaware because we don't know these terms. We have no knowledge that is directing our life. Next. So Vimal, you are perfectly right in saying that A and C are very close, but there is a mild difference between A and C. Mental lingering increases vasanas, not physical participation alone. This is the concept that is derived and drilled in verses 7 to 8. So A and C are very close to each other. You're perfectly right. But if you have to pick one between the two, pick C, because C completes the message in verse 7. Next, please. Cross-section of humanity being selfish. Arvind, you are perfectly right. They are all interrelated to each other. There are many unselfish people who don't have a guru in their life. So absence of guru is no excuse. Fear, insecurity, survival, third instinct is second. Not being able to recognize one's sadharma. Whatever the action you're performing, you're standing in the line, there is an aged person behind you, finding it so difficult to stand. Where is Swadharma and Paradharma in it? You let the person go in front of you and say, you please go. I can wait for 3 more minutes. There is no Swadharma, Paradharma there. For unselfishness, Swadharma and Paradharma is not required in all the contexts. Ignorance of higher, of self. All of us are ignorant of self. So the option that might suit very close is fear, insecurity, survival, herd instinct. Attachment also. You can pick attachment into it. So your own reason is given there so that you can bring more angles to it. But if you have to pick one, fear, insecurity, what will happen to me? What will happen to my family? If I work for the society, this fear, insecurity, and the herd instinct, that peer pressure that drives the society, puts us in a lane. It pushes in a lane. We are not able to think outside it. Anyone has anything to say about the group discussion format? It's quite an achievement that 10 questions that we covered in the short span. And 5 questions were based on karma jnana. 5 questions were based on multiple choice. Pick the most suitable. So as Kamal rightly did and Vimal also did, in such instances, we are supposed to pick one that suits you most or suits your logic most, and also argue against the others. It's not enough if you pick one. So in other words, there are 4 or 5 different dimensions in which your thought process can happen. Any other question or any other feedback anyone has?
Rangaji, just wanted to say thank you. I mean, for someone who's not been regularly attending all these sessions, this was a wonderful recap. Truly appreciate that. I'll ask for the recording if you don't mind. I want to watch it again. Thank you.
Certainly. Also, Aparna will request to you, Aparna, if you can make the slides of the questions along with the group summaries from everyone. You can take the summaries, the 7 people who summarize the verses. You can send in the input to Aparna or Swarna. We can synthesize that into a document and then share it with everyone so that they can just go through it.
Sorry, Rangaji, just quick feedback. It was really good. We really enjoyed the discussion, and especially the small group discussions were really good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm getting fear, insecurity, and all problems now. It looks like I won't have a place after a few weeks. There's no need for a person to run classes. Just give the question, give some input, people will. Yeah. Amazing.
Rangaji, you are
Namaskar. Without you, we won't be able to have classes also like this. So, so that is very important. Like it was really great.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Bhaskar-ji.
We always need you, Rangaji. We always need you, Rangaji, to guide us in our life to stay on the right path.
I have no other choice, Umesh.
Thank you.
Rangaji. No, I just wanted to say that this was a fantastic format. I think really helps us to reflect and recap. It's very important at the end of each chapter, and thank you for including this.
Yeah, this is what we are doing with the boys and girls, schools and universities, those who are doing the e-learning and satsanga. Brilliant inputs they come up with. It's amazing. It is.
Rangaji, interesting session, Rangaji. It was really as if we are sitting in the academy and we are doing the same, the same experience I got today. Thanks, and thanks a lot, Rangaji and the group.
Thanks to all of you. Did a great job in synthesizing everything, especially the presenters. Like a flight landing, everyone completed within 3 minutes. That was amazing.
Rangaji, the diversity of each one being engaged and the format was excellent. We had different views and it was able to be synthesized together also. Yeah.
This is the beautiful gift that we have got from Academy, from Sumaji, the format. This is the Manana format, reflection format. In traditional ashrams, in Shankara Mat, in Patashalas, they call it as Sadas, Veda Sadas. Experts pick up topic and the Acharya sits there and the Sadas goes on for 2.5 hours, 3 hours. They don't get up. There's no water to drink. There is no washroom break. Actually, if you Google in YouTube, you'll get Veda Sadas. But so it's all in Sanskrit. They take a topic, they break into 2 groups and it can go for hours together. So same topic, same format, Swamiji has brought into group discussion.
Thank you for this session, Rangaji. I think the questions itself, just introducing us to the concept of how to question a particular chapter, reading through those questions, that was new to me. It's like, I think, thank you for the questions. So,
you're right.
The one takeaway I have is that as an individual, you have one perspective of how you view the teachings, but everybody else has their own different perspectives from their own point of view, from their own lives or whatever. And it's interesting to hear all the different perspectives from different people and see how they align or don't align with your thoughts, and how you realize how much difference of perspective there is on the same teaching.
Correct. Yeah, the most important point is that you're perfectly right. Collective brainstorming is the beneficial aspect of this format. Okay, friends, we'll meet next week with the remaining set of verses of chapter 3 with something as engaging as we had today. Hari Om. Thank you all.